My email address, stacytaylor@cox.net, and we're thrilled to have with us, and this is based on a local episode that we had on the show I do in San Diego, California, Phil Donohue. Phil has been honored with 20 Daytime Emmy Awards, including 9 for Outstanding Host, the George Foster Peabody Broadcasting Journalism Award. He's been a pioneer in television talk format since 1967, and just, I'll tell you what, he was on the show the other day that I was doing, and it was just a kick-ass show. He just was calling it like he saw it and hadn't lost a bit. I shouldn't even say that because it's suggesting that he might have, but he was actually doing a promotional tour on a movie that he's co-producing and directing called Body of War, which looks at the occupation of Iraq and the war in Iraq through a disabled veteran who is now on the speaking circuit as a avowed anti-Iraq war activist, and yet Phil was riffing on his own, talking politics just like the good old days. So it's a thrill to have him back on a national radio show right now. Phil Donohue.
Hi, Stacy. Thank you for the invite.
It is my pleasure, and we'll talk about the movie in 1 second, but I'm looking here, see, headline, U.S. troop deaths push monthly toll to 7-month high in Iraq. I'm looking at something from the Washington Post about dropping 200-pound bombs in some sort of a terror campaign against Sadr City that blew up a bunch of women and children. And yet, as I look at the political landscape, apparently it's some preacher from Chicago and rolling back gas taxes for the summer, which seem to have seized the American public's attention. How do you explain that?
Well, Thomas Young, who's the subject of our film, tells me this. He's sitting at home in his wheelchair, where he's going to be for at least another 60 years, because the commander-in-chief who sent him to war will not approve stem cell research. He sits in his wheelchair, and he's watching television, and the entire screen is filled with Britney Spears, getting in the limo, out of the limo, the flashbulbs. And along the bottom, on the crawl, you see 5 American soldiers killed in Iraq yesterday. This war the mainstream media has lost interest in this war. It's no longer, the war is now A16, page 16. Certainly seldom above the fold. The American people have got too much else on their mind. And by the way, it's hard to criticize them for worrying about getting thrown out of their house because they've got a subprime mortgage, or because they can't find a good job after going to college and working hard all those years, or truckers who can't make a dime because of the price of fuel. So all of the dollar falling against the euro, I mean, this is about spending $4 billion a week, or $3 billion on the war, $3 billion a week. About 145 to 150 billion a year for this war, and that doesn't include the 500 billion where the Pentagon is already spending, which we continue to spend. We're spending ourselves to oblivion, and we are sending our children to fight a war that now everybody agrees never should have been fought, and we're still doing it. And the American people are standing mute. They're standing there.
Well, you raise a good point.
Somebody's going to have to explain this.
Well, and you do raise a good point. You conflated all of those issues there. We have virtually no policy, except apparently a warmongering policy. We have no policies to address these energy issues that are obviously at the root of the rising food prices. I mean, for crying out loud, Phil, you've been around for a long time. Did you ever think that there would be a run on rice, one of the staples in Costco's and price clubs around the country?
Imagine. And by the way, corn's going up because we're using it for ethanol. So the price of corn, edible corn, is going up. On and on it goes. This administration has to be identified for what they are. They're radicals. These are people that wanted to privatize war and, did to a major way in Iraq. Imagine the G.I. Joe in World War II. Fighting alongside a guy in civilian clothes who makes 6 times more than he does, or maybe 10. This is what this administration has done. They've turned their back on the most magnificent experiment in the history of civilization. That's how I feel about the American experience. This Constitution protects individuals. It protects little kids who are Jehovah's Witnesses who don't want to salute the flag. when everybody in America threw stones at him. It came down and said, hold it, just like the Constitution is supposed to work, to protect the dignity of the individual, to protect the individual against the powerful or the tyranny of the majority. You know, it's such a noble, noble vision, this document. And we're turning our back on it at a time when we need it the most. We're walking away from it. Amazing.
If you have a
and the framers told us this would happen.
If you have a question for Phil, 866-87-RANDY on the Nova M radio network. Well, you know, Phil, I can understand fully why people are. I read something from some think tank in D.C. that said because of housing costs that the average homeowner will lose about $85,000 in wealth this year alone. I understand about rising food prices and how that can distract you. I can understand about gasoline prices and all of that. But, you know, what explains the fact that the same people that should be perhaps focused a little more on what's happening in the Middle East should be focused on what's happening in the economy, but then are so easily led by their nose, by the media, into issues about what Geraldine Ferraro might have said or who wore a lapel flag pin when he was doing that, and some preacher that nobody ever heard of, or some bomb thrower from 1970 that nobody ever heard of until that debate the other week.
Right.
What explains that?
Well, first of all, we've got a weird election year. In fact, I think it's very American. There's nothing wrong with having a real shootout and let it go on a couple of days. Where is it written that we have to have this over with by February?
Not.
The problem, of course, is that you've got an array of 24/7 news operations diagramming every sentence these candidates are saying and those who support them. So we're getting a paralysis of analysis. You know, imagine Eisenhower being held accountable for what his preacher said. I mean, this is a whole new guilt by association thing. I'm not saying we don't need this information, we should have it, but the inquisition that's following this is a little unbecoming. And, you know, and we need no more evidence of what corporate media is doing to our democracy than the realization that every major metropolitan newspaper in this country supported this war. Imagine. You know, and this is the land of many voices, cacophony of opinions and rising, learning, pushing, pulling, learning from each other, hammering out compromises. Don't make me laugh. This is an administration that told the nation to shut up and sing. We know what we're doing. Don't bother us, or all of that. And here we are. Here we are.
Go shopping.
Good.
Roy in Pine Bluff, Arizona, or Arkansas, I'm sorry. You're on the Randy Rhoads Show, and you're speaking with Stacy Taylor and Phil Donohue. What's going on, Roy?
Well, I want to congratulate Phil for not clocking, this Eddie Haskell wannabe Tucker Carlson the other day on MSNBC. I thought Phil's self-control was incredible.
Phil, you had a Tucker Carlson experience?
I did. He got upset because I called Cheney a wimp. He really felt he had to throw himself on that verbal hand grenade.
Well, as a much decorated war veteran himself, I'm sure Tucker Carlson probably did take exception to that.
Yeah, and he wanted to know if I served. That's where we are here. And by the way, 5 deferments for Dickie Cheney, I think that rises to the level of wimpdom.
I am Stacy